Hi, today we're going to get an overview of using the Winchester Systems FlashNAS ZFS product, and we're going to show you the ease of use characteristics of this high performance, highly scalable, and highly usable storage array. So first what we're going to do is log into the user interface. This is a web-based GUI and is accessible via any web browser. So here's the primary logon screen, and I'll just enter my logon credentials. And once you log in, you will get this home page. And what's nice about the home page, it gives you a really great snapshot in terms of a lot of usable information about your product right from the start. So first thing you'll see is system health, which is very important. And you'll see that all of the buttons are green here, so that indicates that everything is active. And you see, as I mouse over, you can get specific information about areas of the product itself. So for example, specific information about all the fans in the array itself, or any of the expansion buds, temperatures, controllers. You'll also see that there's a panel here for some basic system tasks, so it makes it very easy for you to click and find what you're trying to do. There's a tab here which talks about system performance, and you'll see it's just some high-level data that is gathered on a 10-second basis. At the top of the screen, you'll see some tabs that are shortcuts, and by clicking on them, you can get back to the home page. You can get to a set of shortcuts which show you some of the basic tasks that kind of emulate the left-hand sidebar here. So I'm just going to pull down and view a few of the quick status tabs here and go over some of the basics, and then we'll have some follow-up videos to go over in more detail how you would allocate and manage your array. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the status tab. Underneath status, you'll see there's two items: system information or a dashboard. System information, it gives you the model name, the software version you're running, your service tag ID, and information about the processor's memory and network interfaces configured on your FlashNAS ZFS product. The dashboard is a real-time running status of your array. It gives you information in regards to how busy are the CPUs, and you'll see that there's two controllers. This is a fully fault-tolerant, high availability, redundant controller solution, and you can either turn on and off the controllers as desired in terms of the display. You can also see information about your network bandwidth capabilities. So again, it's aggregated and it's for each controller. You'll see memory utilization in terms of each controller, and how busy the disks are on the back end, or where your data is stored on your controllers. In addition, you can see a number of information screens in regards to the various software or protocol services in action here. So, for example, CIFS, how many CIFS connections are connected to this FlashNAS ZFS array, how many NFS connections and which type, either V3 or V4. If you were using NDMP to either revert or backup data off of your FlashNAS array, you'd see that indicated here in terms of megabytes per second. FTPs, if you had any FTP users using the array, you'd see that reflected here. And lastly, volumes. This reflects if you have any iSCSI volumes in use, you would see the actual transfer rates occurring both reads and writes. Configuration. So this is the tab that you would use when you set up or modify configurations of the array. So for example, under the service tab, you'd see that you can configure things like your file protocols. So if you wanted to turn on or off CIFS or FTP or NFS, Apple File Protocol or iSCSI, this is the tab you would do it on. If you wanted to enable LDAP or NIS, this is the tab that you would be able to do that, and you would also be able to configure the protocols here. Miscellaneous, if you wanted to enable antivirus support, NDMP, or use SNMP, this is where you'd be able to turn those on or off or configure them. The System tab. So underneath the System tab, this is where you can configure things like your host settings, date and time, language, and your administrator password. So under host settings, we recommend that you pick some meaningful names for you for the 2 host names for each controller, and these would be used for your mount points, and you can also use it to manage the array versus putting in the IP address as I did here. Date and time, so here's where you would set up your date and time. You can set your time zones up, and in addition you can also select if you want to use automatic daylight savings time. Alternatively, you can configure your FlashNAS ZFS array to use a centralized NTP server. Language, at this point we only have English, but as later language translations are available here, you'd be able to change them and select them to pick localized screens. Admin password, this is where you can change the default password for your administrator user. Alright, let's go take a look now under Network. So under the Network tab, this is where you would configure all of the IP, or if you had iSCSI configurations, this is where you do all your setup here basically. Under Basic Settings, this gives you the ability to configure your management ports. So there are 2 10, 100, 1 gig ports, one on each controller, and you could set those up for your specific IP addresses, net masks, and gateways. If you wanted to use DHCP, that's also available to you. On this FlashNAS ZFS array, I have a mix of both 10 gig and 1 gig iSCSI ports. I have, you'll see here, my 10 gig ports set up. In addition, I have a pair of link aggregate groups for my 4 1 gig ports set up here. But this is where you'd be able to configure any of the specific ports. So, for example, if we click on Edit, you'll see that it brings me up in an edit screen, and I'm allowed to set the IP address, the net mask, gateways. Do not change the MAC addresses. Leave those as defaulted. You can either set up to use DHCP or static addresses, and you can also decide if you want to do IPv4 or IPv6. DNS, so this is where you would add your DNS name server if you were using that. Routing, this is where you can see that we have a gateway set up. This is where you would be able to configure routing if you were wanting to set up specific routes. Trunking, as we talked about previously, I've set up a couple of link aggregate groups or trunks here. This gives you the ability to consolidate multiple 1 gig or 10 gig ports together for both performance and availability. Lastly, jumbo frames. So if your network infrastructure and switches support jumbo frames and your clients support jumbo frames, this is a good way to improve performance, and you can set them up on a interface by interface basis. Peripherals, we'll just briefly look at the peripherals. This is where you would enable a UPS if you had a UPS. So the FlashNAS ZFS array can be connected to a UPS and monitor it. If the UPS gives a trap alert indicating that power has been lost and the array should power down, it'll do that automatically. You could turn your buzzer on and off. There's a buzzer indicating a fault. Same thing with a service LED. You can turn that on and off to identify and find the array easily. And lastly, you could turn off your fault LED remotely without going into the lab. Notifications. So this is where you could use either SMP or SMTP, so you can either get email updates or SNMP traps. Storage. So under the Storage tab, you'll see that there's multiple options here. Pool. This shows you the various virtual pools in the ZFS array here. Storage is configured into pools. Those pools are then configured into either folders or volumes, depending on if you want to do emulate block storage, or if you want to do files. Disks. This gives you a list of disks in your array. It shows you their slot locations, both in the internal slots in the array NAS head, or also if you had attached JBODs, It shows you the model names, their capacities, and if they're used in a pool, you'd see information about that here located on the rightmost column. If you had SSDs in your configuration, I don't have any for this one, but you would see information about those SSDs, what models they are, their size, what they're used for, and what pool they're in. Using SSDs is a good way to improve your performance of specific pools, and they're optional and they can be added after the fact. Folders, this is where you configure folders. So you'll see on this configuration I have two folders, one called folder 1, one called pool-joe_new folder. You can see what protocols are enabled for the folders. This is also where you would add additional folders, or conversely you could update or modify the configuration of an existing folder. In addition, you've got more information on the configuration file, the configuration screen here. And you'll see that it talks about things like the quota, how much space is available. If you've turned on deduplication, the array supports built-in deduplication, compression, antivirus, or the transactional log. And we'll talk about that in more detail. Backups. So the FlashNAS ZFS array has the ability to take snapshots of specific pools and or folders. You can do remote replication to a specific pool. So if you wanted to back up an entire pool to another NAS and keep identical copies either on a snapshot basis or real-time mirroring, you could do that. Remote replication gives you the ability to replicate to a standard rsync-based product. And lastly, you could set up scheduling. So it's a very powerful capability to do snapshotting and backing up things on a schedulable basis. Maintenance. So there's two key things you could use maintenance for. One is for an event log. You'll see that each line gives you information about specific events that have occurred in your array. You can filter them to limit what you see based on the severity. So you can go from an informational message to critical messages, error messages, and just warnings. So it gives you a quick way to see specific event types. You can also export them. So that's something that if we needed to provide you with support, there's a way to do that. Under the System tab, there's a means to update your software. It's a very easy rolling upgrade type process. It doesn't involve downtime. It's basically a point and click type of upgrade. You can back up your system settings. This is a great way to save all the configuration information you've put together. So if you want to emulate that configuration on another array or have it as a backup in case the entire array is somehow lost or damaged, that gives you the ability to do that, and then you can restore it later. In addition, this has some debug information. So, if there's a specific problem on your array, we may ask you to back up this information and send it to us for debugging purposes. The High Availability tab. This is where you would perform things like shutting down your array, rebooting it completely, or conversely, you could shut down, deactivate a specific controller. You see there's two controllers, or you could shut down the controller completely. All right, that's an overview of our interface. There'll be follow-on videos that you can take a look at, which will go into more details on things like setting up pools and folders and backing up. So I thank you for your time, and we look forward to working with you.